Hopefully everybody has an outline, and I should say praying and testing on it. Nice, friendly, happy subject. Actually, it's a happy subject. It's just it's a little intense at the beginning. You're going to like it as we move along here. I've been living off this sermon for a long time now. I know a number of you live this way as well, especially when you're going through deep waters. It's so important to learn how to navigate those waters. And one of the most powerful ways Jesus teaches about is to learn to pray. As I talk about praying, usually when we think of praying, we think of a petition kind of thing where we're making our list, and asking God to check this one off, and do that, do this, which is certainly a part of prayer, that's petition. But as we understand this subject, especially in the context of praying and testing, it's really important to understand that prayer is broader than that. It includes worship. We were just praying the entire time. We've been praying this entire service just before the Lord. That's the first part of the Lord's Prayer. Remember, hallowed be thy name. But there's this communion in prayer, which is really a very important part. It's not only that we say things to the Lord, but that actually we're hearing from the Lord. And you don't have to hear from the Lord in direct sentences, impressions. Many of you were hearing from the Lord just this morning. When you feel that warmth come on you, that sense of love, that's the Lord giving you a divine hug. With it sometimes come words. Sometimes you don't even need words. You just need impressions. So it's all in this bundle we call prayer. So prayer is receiving, prayer is talking, prayer is worshiping, prayer is being quiet sometimes. But the key ingredient in all of it is that we sense the presence of God near us. We have that word, the Christmas season, Emmanuel, right? God with us. That's the key thing, right? So when you become a Christian, a dramatic thing happens, a dramatic change. Many of us don't understand how dramatic that really is. I think it's really important to emphasize that point. You become dangerous to hell. You never thought of yourself that way, but that's exactly the way it is. You become very dangerous as a member of the kingdom of God. And of course, that word kingdom has to do with government and rule, right? We're going to mention in a minute. Not only that, but you become a prized, dearly loved child of God. You were that way before you were saved, but after you're saved, you begin to feel that, understand who you really are in God. If you're anything, you're a child of God, but you're also a warrior. And if we look at Luke chapter 22, I want to read some verses to help us understand this dimension of prayer in the context of the war that swirls all around us. So we look at the disciples, and this is toward the end of Jesus' life, right before the end, as a matter of fact. And I'm just going to be reading some verses in this context. And so he's there with his disciples. They've been eating this communion meal like we ate today, and the very first communion meal. And then he looks at them in verse 28, and he says, "You are those who have stood by me in my trials, and I confer on you a kingdom, just as my Father conferred one on me, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel." So he skips actually from the immediate to the distant future, this thing that gets consummated at the very end of time. And I'm not sure what all that looks like, judging the 12 tribes of Israel, but I guarantee you the apostles were listening very carefully, even to the point where he came and said, "You know what, guys, I'm leaving now, but you need to be filled with the Holy Spirit." And they're thinking he's talking about the 12 thrones already, right? Some of you know there's been a lot of distance between then and now. They have a lot of work to do themselves. But anyway, the most important point is that they were conferred on a kingdom. He said, "I confer on you a kingdom." Confer, as is translated in the NIV, means to assign a thing to another as his possession. So the kingdom becomes our possession. It becomes something that we own, something that God gives us. Kingdom literally means authority or rule. Jesus gave us authority to accomplish his objective. His objective is very interesting. You can say a lot of things about what God wants to do on the earth, but at the bottom of it all, he wants to change the hearts of every single person toward him and away from the enemy, so that the entire nations, all the nations of the world, are transformed. So we see that in Matthew chapter 28, 18 to 20. He's after world domination, world change, but world change from the inside out. "All authority in heaven and earth has been given me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." This part, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So we have words like this, teaching people to obey. We're trying to help them understand. Once you get connected to the Lord, he also teaches you. So one of our biggest forms of teaching is teaching you to be connected to God, so he'll talk to you and tell you what he desires and what are in his kingdom and what he wants you to do. And so in short, over time, what happens is the kingdom comes into our heart and changes us from the inside out. And I'm looking at a bunch of smiley faces who have had themselves changed, radically changed. Half of you belong in jail. And the other half are caught. Because we, kind of a rough bunch here, not all of us. Some of us like me. Didn't screw up too bad. But all of us have this horrible thing in common. It's called sin. And not even one's able to separate you from God for eternity. So we all need the blood of Jesus. And of course, all of us are under this heart change atmosphere in God. And it's so dramatic that Jesus even says this, and this gospel of the kingdom that he entrusts to us will preach to the whole world, and then the end will come. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, except all I know right now, as I've been telling you for weeks now, because I just can't get away from this, is that actually this gospel in the world, as you just measure around the world, and I look at all my contacts and talk to them, as I've been doing for the last 30 years, and everybody I know, which is fairly extensive around the world, I'm just so shocked and amazed because the intensity of this gospel of the kingdom, this power of God going out on the earth, and this amazing message that changes hearts from the inside out, is at a level I've never seen before, the world has never seen before, honestly. If you understand the statistics, it's just marvelous. It's amazing. There's probably 400 million people alive at the time of Jesus, and now there's probably 800 million born-again, bona fide believers in Christ in the world. I mean, we have more believers in the world today alive than there were people, twice that in Jesus' time. Amazing. But not only that, it's the progress of the gospel. 2 billion claim to be believers, but probably 800 million really are walking closely with the Lord. And that number is growing and growing and growing. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 1% of the world population every 3 to 4 years. That's how fast things are moving. It's incredible. I don't know what I was thinking all this time, but I just thought, hey, wait a minute. There's 7,000 churches that we've been involved with, and with our brother over here, his sister, just, you know, these guys, these mild-mannered people that sit over there in the corner, they are like dynamos because they're responsible with their giving and the team for literally 500,000 people coming to Christ. We have 7,000 churches and 500,000 people. Can you imagine? I just got the news from James, Brad. He just told me that literally we could start 6,000 new churches every year for the next 3 years. If we wanted to. I mean, if we had the means to do it. I mean, it's literally there because the harvest is ready. Something's happened in the groundwork of this particular area of the world. It's called revival, really. I don't know that I've ever been this close to revival. But it sure feels cool, and I just can't wait to keep releasing. Our church alone is going to be planting 300 churches. We'll be responsible for giving that much money away. You know, it's amazing. It comes down to $86,000, plants 300 churches. Can you imagine? We worked it all out because at the end of the day, there'll probably be 15,000 new believers at the end of about 18 months, maybe. And we worked it all out at $6 a convert. It's incredible. It gets down to that. Of course, it's more complicated than that. Actually, not for us, but for this time and season. I don't know why I'm talking about this so much. I just wanted to get you aware, to be aware that the kingdom is marching forward. Jesus started with Peter, and he gave him and us the keys of the kingdom. That's what it says in Matthew chapter 16. And with that, there's a binding of Satan's purposes and the loosing of God's purposes on the earth. I'm just telling you, his purposes are being loosed on the earth. Both sides, Satan's kingdom and God's kingdom, are very, very aware. And as such, they're very, very aware of you and me, as they were aware of those first disciples. So it's important that we become aware of the seriousness of our position as believers. Sometimes we underestimate that. When a person just takes a few steps toward the Lord grabs him, gets him, woos him in, woos her in, changes, rearranges everything, and they become a weapon, literally a weapon. And some of those weapons turn into quite formidable weapons. They might look like a baby, but those little baby believers, they have all kinds of callings. There are works that you're supposed to do that have been prepared since the foundation of the world. Isn't that amazing? This is the foundation of the world. There are things that you have to do, things ahead of you. Sometimes darkness is more aware of that than we are. We have a tendency to discount ourselves. But we have been given the keys of the kingdom. The keys of the rule of God are in us. That's how God wanted it. He's orchestrating the whole thing. Now, as we look at Luke chapter 22, we were just reading there, and I want to look at that again, these passages. So, Luke chapter 22. And so, Jesus at 29 says, "And I confer on you a kingdom, just as my Father conferred one on me." Talked about that. No, 2 verses later, though, you see something interesting change. I mean, we go from the top of the mountain, and all of a sudden, there's something really serious here, a warning. "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat." Wait a minute, I thought we just got the kingdom, yeah? And the other side doesn't like it so much. So when we begin to make progress, when we begin to move forward, we have a real live enemy to deal with. But then he says, good news, "But I prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." And he says, "Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death." Jesus answered, "I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me." Wow. Of course, Peter at the time didn't believe it. The good news about the whole thing is that Jesus was praying for him, and he prays for us. You know what? Jesus gets his prayers answered. And on top of all that, we know that the Spirit of God is interceding for us. Isn't that amazing? I think that's something to really remember. But in all that intercession, the question is, are we praying also? Because the way the Lord's arranged this whole thing is he's arranged us as partners with him. So we're partners in this whole grand scheme, this whole thing that God has arranged in the earth. We're God's partners. He didn't want to do it without us. That's why he conferred on us the kingdom. But in the midst of that, in the midst of Jesus' prayers for us and the Spirit interceding for us, there's us as well. We're partners. So the question is, are we praying also, just like Jesus prayed and demonstrated for us on the earth and does today? Jesus told his disciples in the midst of his greatest trial, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." So we see in these verses, he goes to the Mount of Olives to go through the greatest trial of his life. So let's pick up with verse 39. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives. Evidently it was a habit, something that they had done before. And his disciples followed him. And I want to just pause for a moment there, because I'm thinking what's happening now is there were some very familiar patterns, and even the drum beats in the background of trouble. Ever since those disciples had known Jesus, he got in trouble fairly early. So people had been warning him. There had been problems. He'd been running to religious leaders very early on. And there always in the background had been this resistance and this thing in the background. So Jesus got, especially, it must have seemed serious to them at the meal, the communion meal. They go out to the Mount of Olives, as usual. That's a really important word, I believe, in this story. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." Well, the hour was sort of late. He didn't know exactly what he meant, because sometimes he would say stuff and they didn't know exactly what he meant. We thought, well, this is another thing. We'll find out later what he means. But he withdraws about a stone's throw beyond them, and kneels down and prays. "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." So Jesus, we see in these verses, in the midst of his incredible trial, was praying. That's how he addressed the issue. Some of you are facing some pretty big trial. My question to you this morning is, have you learned to pray? And as we're going to discuss this a little bit, we're going to find that there's some multidimensional aspects of this, but the key thing is, have you remembered the Lord? This area does us in a little bit, especially at Christmas and other times, because we're just so busy. We got all kinds of things going on, which actually distracts us from being co-partners with the Lord. A lot sometimes. Matter of fact, we can go whole hours, so maybe 6 hours, 8 hours in a whole day without thinking of God one time or barely thinking about Him. And yet Jesus, this one who's on side of us, wants to fellowship all the time. He has this habit of wanting to talk and us to talk to Him. He likes us, actually. He likes to partner with us. Sometimes there's days, maybe even weeks. Then finally we wake up, maybe one day we say, oh man, I just got to go to church. You know? And so, going to church doesn't get me to the place I need to be any more than parking my car in my garage, right? So the thing is, just because I'm in the garage doesn't mean that like I'm home. There's something that God wants out of us. Some of you experienced that this morning. So this habit that we need to develop is the habit that Jesus had all the time. He was always praying, but now in the worst part of his life, the most difficult time, he's really praying. And he's warning the disciples about something. He says, pray that you'll not fall into temptation. The interesting thing about this Greek word is it can also be translated testing or trial. Matter of fact, I've actually took one part of the Lord's Prayer and I've worn it out these days because not long ago, I got a big revelation about this, more than I've ever had in my life. It's just simply this, that our prayer life can even help us avoid testing and trials altogether. Sometimes we get a little confused when we go to Matthew chapter 6, verse 13, and we see this Lord's Prayer, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. And these are things that God has us to pray. But if you notice at the end of it, he says, and lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. And that word can easily be translated, maybe better understood in this context, and lead us not into testing or trial, but deliver us from the evil one. That makes it connected more to the next verse. But either way, it works. I don't want to be led into a place where I'm tempted to sin. So I pray about that all the time. But also I pray, Lord, keep me from trial. How many know the world's a little dangerous place these days? Notice that? People are getting shot in church, for heaven's sake. There's all kinds of stuff going around. The level of violence has risen, and the level of division and the voices that are going out into the world today, I think, are amplified maybe more than I've ever heard. All kinds of things going on, all kinds of anger. Got somebody that's trying to develop a nuclear bomb as fast as they possibly can and threaten us. Our leaders are trying to figure it out. There's all kinds of testing and trials. So you know what I do? I just pray, and we do this every morning, and I do it all the time in my life. One of my biggest prayers is, Lord, lead us away from testing and trial. I even pray for the 5 out here. Lord, I pray nobody have an accident. In our territory in the South County area, no fires, no earthquakes, no serious stuff. I pray you deliver this area from evil. I believe that's part of my inheritance. I believe I can ask God for that, and he'll actually do it. Yes. Lord, keep my children safe. Lead them away from testing and trial. Sometimes we forget that part, because sometimes prayer seems like more of a discipline or a sort of spooky kind of like thing that maybe monks do or somebody that's super spiritual does. But actually, these prayers are so incredibly practical. What can be more practical than keeping forest fires out of your area, or keeping illness away from your body, or the direct attack of violence and terrorism out of our church, off of your life? Oh my goodness. I think we should all be wearing this part out. Lord, lead us away from testing. Lead us out of trouble. I like to do it early in the day. Lord, I'm going to go into this day. No accidents. Lord, no attacks. Lord, keep the area free of fires. Keep the area free of earthquakes. No tsunamis. I just go right down the list of many bad things I can think of. And I pray that over all of us. I say, Lord, over our whole church, I pray you lead them away from testing and trial. Boy, what an army we would be if we're all praying that all the time. That's part of your God-given inheritance, is to pray against trouble. The very thing we see Jesus doing in these passages. So a lifestyle of prayer, and I'll just add to it now, because when we say prayer, we're usually thinking of petition or whatever, but let me just add a few other words. Thankfulness. We can put worship in there. That's what we did. That was prayer. When we worship like we do, we're praying. We're praying. Actually, the Vineyard has been a prayer movement from the beginning. We never sort of got the credit for it. We never thought of ourselves that way as great prayers, but actually, if you're a worshiper, you're a prayer. And the thing that's constant between the two is the communion with the Lord. Communion with the Lord. So this communion with the Lord, whether we're worshiping, we're speaking out, we're in thanksgiving, the various ways that God gives us to interact with him in the spiritual way. The amazing thing about all of this is that it gives us great success in dealing with the spiritual forces around us, and that's the key thing. I think John 10:10 pretty much makes it all clear, the atmosphere that we're in. It's one of my favorite verses, and also one of those verses that I pay a tremendous amount of attention to. The thief, which would be Satan and his demons, those that represent him, comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. So there's a lion roaring around looking for someone to devour, and his only issue is to steal from you, kill, and destroy your life, and he's real. And you're a marked person if you're just a human being, but if you know Jesus Christ, you're really marked, and you got to start acting like you understand that dynamic. Because on the one side, someone's just trying to steal and kill and destroy. So as soon as that begins to happen in my life, I just say no as quickly as possible. Sometimes I go hours. Sometimes I go days without saying that. Just say, no, you cannot steal from me. I don't resist. Sometimes I just let life just bump me along like a ping pong ball, or just bump around. Yet, the truth of the matter is that these forces are meaning to harm us, and we can make a difference, because the next line is, I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. Other translations say abundantly. What does that mean? That means in every area of your life, abundance, the goodness of the Lord. I love what David said. He said, I would have despaired unless I believed I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Don't you like that? That's one of my favorite prayers. And so what area do you need goodness? I need it in my finances. I need it with my kids. I need it in my health. And I will not stop till I see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. If there's no goodness, I'm going to pray, and I'm going to ask God to fix it. And I'm going to go right to the root, because many times the very root of it is the enemy himself, who's a thief. And all he wants to do is steal from me and kill me and destroy me. And it's very powerful, sometimes, this attack on us. Sometimes we're downright ignorant about the war that we're involved in. So prayer helps us cope with that. Prayer puts us in that supernatural atmosphere, that supernatural place that helps us understand the real issues of life. That's why I love prayer so much. Let me just mention a few things that prayer does to help us navigate. It's really, really important. First thing is that prayer keeps us from the failure of surprise. Been a pastor a long time now, and one of the things I've observed through the years about my own life and other people's life is people make really dumb choices in a sudden crisis. I'll tell you, they get in a crisis, and then I watch them as they make these choices. And some of them are incredibly hard to undo. Their marriage gets in trouble in crisis, and they start doing this. Pretty soon, this guy moves out, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And some of those choices you make right at the point of attack, right at the point where there's trouble, right at the point where we're experiencing some crisis, that you make some of your most important choices in that moment. It's really, really important that we make those choices, and the best ones. And the thing is, the reason why we don't is because of surprise. Because we've been living this sort of secular lifestyle, and then we get our block knocked off in some way, and we're shocked. But you know, the oldest trick in the book is to surprise you. It's the axiom of all warfare. All warfare is, I want to surprise you. If I can surprise you on my side, I will win. If I surprise you enough and overwhelm you enough, I'll get you running. And you won't even know why you're running. You'll just be running, because fear will be struck in your heart. This is the oldest trick in the book of the enemy. The thing of it is, when we're praying in communion, we're in the atmosphere, we're aware of things. But when we're not aware. And so we get surprised, we get shocked. One of the worst things that could ever happen to somebody when they're boxing or fighting is to not see a punch when it comes. To totally miss it. I saw a guy in a football game. It was Washington Redskins Cowboy game. See it toward the end of the game, that quarterback? Man, he ran into a brick wall, man. I tell you, I can feel it in my body right now. Big old 6'6", 300-pound lineman. He didn't see him coming. Boom. I hate those things. You ever had that happen? You didn't see it coming. Thing is, it's so important. See, the disciples didn't see what was coming. They didn't see it coming, right? Because They weren't aware. They weren't praying like Jesus. That's why he said, pray. You will not enter into temptation. Let's go back to Luke chapter 22. This is incredibly instructive to us. And so what did Peter do? Well, he got surprised. I think that he had been in this place like the other disciples when they'd been around. They knew there was trouble all the time, and they'd been in it so long. And they liked the meal and everything, but I don't think they were really fully aware of what was about to come down. So he got surprised. Jesus even warned him, you're going to be surprised. But he still wasn't ready. Matter of fact, what were the disciples doing? They were sleeping while Jesus was praying. And then when it hit, he didn't know what to do. And then we find here, he actually fulfills the very words that Jesus told him. You see it in verse 60. Man, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Wow. Can you imagine that? Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. He'd even forgotten the word. Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. He just missed it. Somehow, he just was ignorant. We do the same. That's why this is so important to understand. And Peter in his writings really is fascinating. You look at Peter's letter, and go to 1 Peter chapter 4. And this is why he wrote these words. Verse 12, dear friends of 1 Peter 4, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. Those are really interesting words. He just assumes now, if he's had a little background, been walking with the Lord for a while, or I could say even without Jesus physically present, he realized that actually trial and trouble were a normal part of life. He says, you know what? Don't be surprised, like I was. Don't be shocked. Matter of fact, another thing I find, people, and I think part of it is because we have such a great deal here, living in the United States. Sometimes that's my theory. But when trouble comes, especially difficult trouble, it's amazing how surprised we are. But we should live always on this edge of praying and interceding, knowing the war that we're walking in between demons and angels. So when we stay in that place, we stay alert. Don't be surprised at the fire ordeal that has come to test you. Wow, and interesting, to come on to test you. So you mean God must allow trial to come every once in a while to test us, to see what's in our heart? Testing actually isn't just passing tests. It has more to do with strengthening us so that we're stronger. It's like metal is tested, right? Get refined over and over again. God wants us to be strong. Matter of fact, he wants us not to lack anything. And so sometimes our heart wanders and we actually experience lack and loss, but we should be getting gain because our heart's in this place and we don't know it. And the wages of sin is death, and it's stealing from us, and we don't even understand the attitudes that are happening, and we're getting ripped off. So tests come to test it, to make us aware of where we're at, and to get stronger, not to get weaker. And not to torment us and to come along and just, say, okay, you were a bad boy, now I'm going to spank you. It's more than that. It says, as though something strange were happening to you. I know I hate trials as much as anybody, but I think that I'm learning to take the strange out of trials. I'm in this battle, I'm in this fight, and I'm moving out. And the more we move and the more we charge forward, then we're going to experience the resistance. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's little. I'm not always expecting horrible trouble, but when trouble comes, it shouldn't come to me as strange. It's part of walking this planet. It's part of walking life. And that could seem by some to be sort of negative. But actually for me, it's really, really positive. Because I know who Jesus is. I know how much he loves me. And I know that every time I go through one of these, I get better, not worse, and I get stronger, and I get more, not less. Right. Can I just say that for a moment? You get more, not less. Even though it looks like subtraction, it's actually multiplication and addition. That is the glory of this whole thing. So Jesus enters this horrible trial, right? But what comes out of it? He resurrects from the dead, deals the fatal blow to the enemy that we're still living in the light of, even 2,000 years later, right? And if you look at 1 Peter 5, 8 and 9, something similar. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Peter got devoured. He understood what that was like. That's why he's writing this. Be alert. Always be of sober mind. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. And this word resist is interesting. If you look at B on your outline there, prayer, worship, and thanksgiving strengthen us. God actually gives us the power with internal provision to resist. To receive this inner fortitude that Jesus needed as he faced the cross, we find in praying. As a matter of fact, we see in this scenario, as we read before, he even had to distance himself from the disciples who were not praying. If you look at that Luke 22:41. Why did Jesus step away from those disciples? It says literally that he stepped away. He said he withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed. Why did he do that? Because he needed to engage God. These guys were asleep. They weren't into it. They were on another page. So he had to pull away from that and pull into the Lord. Right? And they kept finding him. Are you still sleeping? Are you still sleeping? You know, they weren't doing him a lot of good, but even in his faith, in his inner person, they were actually doing him harm. He needed to get away from that a little bit and connect with God. He needed to put the plug in to God and get the divine energy, the divine comfort, and the divine strength that he needed. And that's what we need to do. Prayer is this place of inner fortitude. It's a place to receive. And the thing is, what's awesome about praying in times when you're not in trouble is you learn to commune, you learn to hear his voice, so that when the times of trouble come, it's easy for you to switch into that space and get the strength that you need, and not panic, not freak out, listen to God's voice, and let him lead you along. That's why prayer and testing go together so powerfully. It's one of our best weapons. And we look at Jesus' life, and so in his everyday life, I love one of my favorite passages in the scriptures, Luke 5:15-16. Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. I've thought about that a lot, because honestly, I haven't been really good at that, going to lonely places and praying. But actually, I'm getting much better. Not that I'm trying to earn my way into it, but I'm just actually finding that even in my lonely places, even when I'm sitting, there's no worship band, there's no songs going, there's nothing to read, I'm finding I can find God. And it's a really great treasure for me. Honestly, I felt like going to lonely places was maybe one of the more boring things that I probably could do, you know. But actually, I'm finding that I can find him in those places, those spaces. As a matter of fact, I'm finding that probably I need to learn how to do that more and more, because I'm not always around church or church people. Sometimes in the middle of some sort of crisis. If you notice how crises often come when I'm alone? Matter of fact, that's one of the key things. The enemy's always trying to isolate you and get you alone. Sometimes you're alone. Sometimes you're in a place and there's no one to call and you need to be in that place. Well, the thing is, if you've learned to live that way, if you've learned to go to lonely places and pray, when you've learned to access God there, then when you get in that space where you feel isolated and attacked, again, there's the presence of the Lord. There's that prayer habit to sustain you, to directly resist whatever is coming against you. Matter of fact, we look at Paul's life and we find out how he coped with trials. And I love these verses so much because they're from Paul's heart, and they're meaningful verses to me as a lifestyle. And to me, they're part of my survival with the Lord. This is how he puts it. This whole thing of, again, we receive strength from prayer. Prayer is not a discipline. It's not only giving out, which I do, I pray for people, but it's also breathing in. It's communion. And if you don't ever breathe in and you're always breathing out, it's a problem, right? So like for me, like even our morning prayers, we spend an hour and 15 minutes or something worshiping and about 15 petitioning. I tell you, the petitions go great that way, right? But I'm communing. I like to commune. That's why we like to worship here so much. You know, it's not like, let's do a few songs and get ready for the sermon, you know, or the offering or whatever. It's like, when you're worshiping, that is the service. That's why you come. You come to commune. And something happens in the atmosphere better than when you're alone sometimes even. Because you're all together. But if you can do it alone and together, then you're really fully equipped. And worship is a part of that whole experience. That's why Paul says, rejoice, Lord, always. I'll say it again, rejoice. So learning to rejoice is part of this experience. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. One of my key checkpoints with all prayer is, okay, who have I not forgiven? Who have I left on the hook? Who am I mad at? Who am I angry? Because I got to connect with God. And the Bible says, how can two walk together unless they have agreed? And if I'm mad at somebody and haven't forgiven someone, I just like mess the whole thing up. To go down. Sometimes Lord, if I feel stopped up inside, sometimes I feel the Lord go, okay, who am I mad at? Who I've got a bad attitude about? Sorry, God. I don't want to go there anymore. I release them from having to make it right. Okay. That's what that part's about. Do not be anxious about anything. I like that part. But in every situation, address it specifically by prayer and petition. And then he throws this other great word in with thanksgiving. Present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, that supernatural peace, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And that's really what we're talking about here with regard to this testing thing and prayer. But this thanksgiving thing's another thing I'm learning a lot about. Giving thanks continually in my life as I walk with the Lord. It's one of the most powerful ways to pray. Did you know that counts? Every time you thank the Lord for something, it counts. And actually it stirs the presence of the Lord and helps you to pray better. You always kind of know where you're at in your heart and how discouraged you are about how easily you give thanksgiving. I've noticed that. When I'm kind of discouraged about something, man, I have a hard time remembering what God did to me or for me 10 minutes ago. If it's big enough, I surely can't remember. It's just so in front of my face, I'm realizing, oh man, this thing is really getting my lunch. I can't hardly think of anything to say thank you about. That's how I know my insides aren't in the right place with the Lord. But when my insides are in the right place with the Lord, I get to pray that I will not enter into temptation. In other words, a testing and trial won't harm me. I pray, I resist. I'm strengthened on the inside. I'm even rebuking and binding and casting down. I'm rearranging the atmosphere. I love that series we did, Shifting Atmospheres. And part of that shifting of atmospheres is our job, and part of that has to do with prayer, especially in a time of testing and trial when the enemy's coming after us. We need to learn to change the atmosphere so we don't get crushed by it. Jesus Christ had the greatest attack that anybody's ever experienced. And guess what? He prayed through it. He's our model. How he got through it was he prayed through it to the place where he could obey. He got God's presence. And all that time, and he'd been in those lonely spaces and those lonely times with him and experiencing God, when the time came for the trial of his life, he was ready. He was equipped. He was communing, even when everybody else wasn't. He needed that strength to get through. He had to hear God's voice. Again, he's addressing God. Mama, Daddy, is there any way I can avoid this? And he hears that clear voice from the Father. No, you know and I know you have to go. And so he heard it. So the last part, this outline C, is prayer also brings revelation for a way out of difficult circumstances. So not only are we enduring, not only is it this keeping a prayer life keeps us from being surprised so that we don't make really dumb decisions in the midst of a vicious attack. But this third thing is really interesting. It gives us great hope. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. No temptation, again, it's that word. It could be translated trial or a test, attack. No attack, no trial, no test has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. In other words, this isn't a brand new thing that nobody has ever experienced before. There's plenty of people that have experienced this before all through history. Satan has the same attacks, same things, may have a different culture, a different way, but it's the same general idea. But here's the great thing. And God is what? Faithful. You just say it over and over again. And God is faithful. And God is faithful. That's the good news. Now we're turning the page, aren't we? He will not let you be tempted or tested, right? Beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, when you are tested, when you're in the middle of a trial, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. So there's a way, not only in the sense of endurance, in the sense of strength, but also the way out, the answer out of this problem that you're in. His answer, his key to unlock the situation. So if you're busy panicking, running away, freaking out, or if you're busy trying to address a very spiritual issue without prayer, without God, without hearing his voice, it's a really difficult problem. But when we're in that space with God and we've learned to pray and we're continuing to make this our habit, then when difficult things come, guess what? We have ears to hear. Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone. And I don't think he was just talking, I think he's talking about this very thing, about hearing God's words. Give us today our daily bread. It's not just about your finances. It's about hearing from the word of God. says, man does not live alone by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God, Matthew 4:4. Jesus said, we should pray, give us our daily bread. It's not just about physical provision, is it? It's about something else. It's about God's provision in all these other areas. I'm trying to remember why I have Matthew 6:11 there. I'm going to go turn there in faith. Oh, give us our daily bread. Well, you'd think I would know that by now. I think I learned that when I was 6 years old. All right, last part. I love this passage in Scripture, James 1:5-8 now, a lot. It's actually been one of those passages that's given me some hope, and then at the same time, like, made me, troubled me, because it always seems to be like this little, like, thing hanging over it, right? So James 1, I'm going to just read these verses for you, 5-8. We'll close down. If any of you lacks wisdom, that's what you need in a difficult problem, right? You just need an answer. I like wisdom. You like wisdom, Brad? Yeah. Number 1 on my list. If any of you lacks wisdom, what should you do? You should ask God. That's called prayer, right? Who gives generously to all without finding fault. How many have found God generous with wisdom? Sometimes yes, and sometimes maybe I'm waiting a while, right? Seems a little generous to me. Just be honest, right? But it will be given to you. He gives generously. In other words, he's trying to say, he's not holding back. He said, no, I'm not going to give you the wisdom. No, I'm not going to make a way for you. No, I'm not going to show you how to get out of this trouble. No way. Or another version is, I'm going to make it really hard on you. The thing is, though, atmosphere in your heart is everything. Another good reason to keep this prayer life. Because atmosphere is everything. What happens is we don't keep this atmosphere. And so then we need this word of wisdom. But then what happens? But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. It's not so much that you need to believe about that request, because you may be asking for something really, really hard, at least in your mind. But the issue is, what's the state of your soul? Are you always blown around back and forth? Trouble happens, you go do this, you run away, do that. Or have you learned to walk in a prayerful way with God? Stabilized. Not just going all over the place. Trouble happens, but it may be painful, but you're in there, right? That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, since the person is double-minded and stable in all they do. It's related to this whole thing of a person getting surprised and running and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. What he's talking about is a person that's stabilized in God. That, again, you're communing with God. You're in this place. So when you need an answer or a way to get out of a problem, you're actually in a better position to actually hear the answer. So when we stay in this place of prayer, we stay in this place with the Lord, it bears so many benefits. It keeps us from being shocked. It keeps us, gives us some resistance and some strength on the inside. But the other side benefit, which is incredible, is if God actually spoke to us, gave us the way out, gave us a wisdom path to go, we would actually hear it. Sometimes God's wisdom paths are exactly the opposite of the way we would think about things, but they will get you out of that problem and onto another place. Sometimes we're in another place. We've sinned or we've fallen. Our mind has gotten so unrenewed that we think, wow, to do that would be suicide. To actually go back and do that would be suicide. To apologize to that person or to make myself vulnerable to that person, that would be crazy. I shouldn't do that, but that's maybe what God's requiring. To sow money, to actually give when I'm in this horrible financial place, that would be crazy. I would never do that, but you know what? God's voice does crazy stuff like that. And it's not always crazy. Sometimes it just goes the opposite of our inclinations, but sometimes it makes us, oh, of course. I'll gladly do that, Jesus. But the key thing is, when the environment on the inside of you is conducive with the Lord, you're walking with the Lord, you have a place for finding the way out. It's much easier. And God promises He'll help you find the way out. But I don't know about you, but I don't want to be in my problems 1/10 of a second longer than I should, right? So I'm going to find out way out faster, not slower. How about you? Right? And I've noticed people as I've counseled with people, you know, and I don't want to say this too directly because I'm a person that needs counsel as well, you know. I get hard-headed too, but one thing, if you counsel enough people, you realize you can see the answer sometimes way before them. You just see it clearly as a bell. But their environment is so tumultuous on the inside, they just can't hear. So sometimes we just have to help them along there, you know, and you have the answer right there. do this, and you know, but you can't even tell them to do that, because if you told them to do that, they would freak out. So you just give them a little bit to do. I think we should be in a place where God can just tell us plain, stop doing that, do this. Yes, sir, I'll do it. Thank you very much. I'm happy now. All right, I can't see the answer still, but I'll do it, because at least there's an answer there. This other thing I'm drowning, you know. I'm being sucked under. So let's all stand. Bless you. I just think there's a great environment in here right now for some of us to settle some really key things in our life. And actually, it's a great environment to just come and pray for a moment. I think as we come here, and I'm going to ask you to respond to this, anyone that would want to, I think some of you need to just do some business with the Lord. Take a moment with Him and just say, Lord, I'm sorry for falling asleep. I'm like Peter. I've been falling asleep at the wheel. I just have not been spiritually alert. I've been so discouraged, so overwhelmed. Okay, so you're going to hear this nice message, but sometimes when we speak, the reason why I ask people to come up, it's not to make me feel better, it's to help you. Because sometimes when you hear a message like this, it's sort of important that you get a moment with the Lord to like solidify that. Let the Lord, almost like let the Lord penetrate a little bit deeper. So some of us just need to become prayerful again. In all its forms. I'm not talking about long lists. I might be talking about long lists. I'm talking more about communion. Just having a sense of God in your life. Boy, I tell you, once you have a sense of God in your life, you can pray about anything. And you just go this way, that way. It's no problem. Just so many of us think of prayer as this long list of petition or whatever, and we've prayed that 1,000 times. But there's other ways around that. Sometimes God just needs to talk to you. Communion. So maybe some of us need to return to communion today. Maybe you just come up here in a moment and just say, God, I resolve to commune with you again. I'm tired of that other lifestyle. That's been a dumb thing I did. The enemy's on my tail. I realize that I may not be the greatest Christian around. I may not feel myself as too powerful, but once I crossed the line in the kingdom of God, I became a marked person. And I want to move out of that into a new place with you. Cope with all that. Other people, I think, today actually need a word from the Lord, and you might just receive it today. The way of escape might be right here at the altar. You're just praying for a moment. You take a pause. The Lord might just put inside you some wisdom about your situation and just talk to you. It might be a voice. It might be in sentence form. It might be just an overwhelming impression or just a sense of God's presence. And just some of us just need to feel God again because we're in this place of testing and trial, and we just need to feel God again. Great place to do it right here now, in this space. So if that's you in any way that I'm talking about here, why don't you come forward right now? Come forward right from your seats. Just come up. There'll probably some people come along and put their hand on your shoulder maybe and pray with you a little bit. If you come all the way up toward the front, that would be awesome. But my primary concern for you today was that you just connect with the Lord. So whether somebody prays for you or not, whether you're just standing here, you have the power inside of you because you know Jesus to do business with God. And I don't care how many times you failed, whatever you do, wipe it all away. It won't do you any good. Just say, I'm sorry. That's all you got to do. Just move into this wonderful space with the Lord. He's creating it through the word we preached, and now He's going to create it in the worship and the music. There'll be a space here, probably last 15, 20 minutes. You don't have to come up. You can do it right from your seat. You want to pause. Ask God to come. Sometimes when He comes, I just like Him to refresh me. It's like getting a splash of water in my face. That's what worship's like. So maybe you just need a splash of water on your face. It's good. But whatever happens, Lord, I pray in this moment right now in Jesus' name, that you would refresh us. You would turn us into prayer people again. And you turn us into communers, and that our inside would be conducive to walk with you. We just ask for forgiveness for our fear and our worries and our sorrows, but now we're coming back. Lord, I pray for the way of escape for anybody that's in a horrible trial. May the Lord give you a way of escape. May the Lord arrange that for you. In your circumstance, I just speak to Him right now. You can do that. Just speak to those circumstances. You must bow to Jesus.
Yes.
Amen.
Draw near to me, I will draw near to you. So pull on the strings of my heart, for I will respond to you. So draw me, so draw near to me, for I will draw near to you. So pull on the strings of my heart, for I will respond
Little physically tired, but still like because I've been having my colds. But yeah, I'm just I came in late today. I was like, oh, I don't want to go. It's all good, you know. I'm happy that I went through the whole process, and I'm just like in a waiting right now. It's just like, I know you're in the waiting. I just keep hearing that.
So draw me, so draw near to me, draw near to you. So pull on the strings of my heart, for I will respond to you.
So a whole year is next year. And I said, Lord, and then how my parents, they have a grandchild being going through a transition right now, and they're in their 80s.
So all my love is yours.
So our family came together, we put it out, we figured with the rent being increased, we have that debt, like we're at that point, we're like,
Sadly, so I can make a place for you. So come on, come on. So all the things that I want. So come on, come on. Sadly.
That's what I got to.
My love is
Really doesn't matter. I sense like something
waiting here
is
for
stirring.
you.
Something waiting to happen.
So come on,
And this morning,
we're waiting here for you. Because you're
this morning,
faithful to
I could see
the end.
there's an emptiness right now.
Yes, you're faithful to the end. Yes, you're faithful to the end. So I will trust in you. Yes, I will trust in you. Because you're faithful to the end. Because you're faithful to the end. Yes, you're faithful to the end. So I will trust in you. I will trust in you. Yes, 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 I will trust in you. I will trust in you. Trust in you. I will trust in you. Yes, I will trust in you. Because you're faithful to the end. Because you're faithful to the end. Because you're faithful to the end. And I will trust in you. And I will trust in you. I will trust in you. Because you're faithful to the end. Because you're faithful to the end. Because you're faithful to the end. So I will trust in you. So come on, come on, come on. Just come on, yes, come on, come on, yeah. Just come on, come on, come on, yeah. Just come on, yeah, come on, come on. I just hear God saying this to us. He said, come on, just come up to me, come and pray with me, come spend time with me, come on. He calls us up. His voice brings power. His word brings anointing. He says, come on, come to me. Come to me, come to me. Come to me, all who are weary. Come to me. Come to me, all who need breakthrough. Come to me. Just come on now. Come on now. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. So come on. Come on. Come on. Presence, come up here, come up now. I found your home. Come up here, come up now. To your presence, come up here, come up now. Find your home, with me. Find your home. Find your rest in me. Jesus, Jesus, let's come and rest in me. Oh, come Oh,